But I think you can have all the intelligence in the world. And if you don't treat people with the respect that they deserve, then you may command their respect, but you're not going to earn it.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
It is going well. I drove into work today and checked LinkedIn and was happy to see someone that I have never met before gave us a really nice compliment on one of the episodes that we published, which was really nice. Like, I love that it's creating some community, but she shared that she joined her father's agency and she didn't think she wanted to. Something happened to her father, and she decided to take over the agency, and she loved that it sounded like you and I loved this industry as much as she did. So she wanted me to know that, which was pretty cool.
That is very cool. I love that feedback. We've been getting some great feedback, and people have been sharing who I did not expect. So I think that's a great ancillary benefit to having a podcast. You get to connect with so many great people who I feel like without the podcast just wouldn't have a reason to reach out.
Agreed. Well, speaking of connecting with some amazing people, I have the distinct honor of introducing someone today that has been a friend of mine for very, very long. I actually tell people that you were my first friend in insurance, and I believe that it's true. You're certainly one of the first insurance agency owners that I connected with, and you are the first agency that I ever visited their office. So it's pretty cool. But welcome to the show, Matt Simon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. It's a great story. You know, it reminds me of how many people, you're talking about the comment that you had this morning, you know, how many people don't really ever give a second thought to this industry. But then once they do, like once they're in, it's like this really well-kept secret. That's what I've been saying for years. It's like, why are we trying to keep it such a well-kept secret? Like we should be telling people, because once they experience it, it's like so many of them never leave, and they absolutely fall in love with it. So that's a great way to open this morning.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's pretty cool that she said she didn't ever want to do this, but now that she's doing it, she absolutely loves it. And I think so many of us feel that way. I mean, insurance found me by chance, and you were one of those people that changed and made me see how incredible this insurance industry is. You've been an incredible friend, but you've also been this really cool leader that I've gotten to watch your career, kind of with an inside view, which I appreciate you allowing me to have. But I would love for the people that don't know you, Matt, tell them a little bit about your journey in insurance today. And then, of course, I'm going to make you dig into the areas that I find fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I probably would have fallen right in that same category where I would not be in this industry right now today if it wasn't for my family. I probably would not have given it a second thought. And I always tell the story, like whenever I was getting ready to graduate from college, I actually had no interest in this industry. There were really kind of two things that I knew. I didn't know what it is that I wanted to do. So I went to school for business. I graduated with a business management and economics degree. So I didn't know for sure exactly what it is that I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. But I always say, like, there were two things I knew I did not want to do. I didn't want to go back to the small town where I grew up, and I did not want to go into insurance. And so when I actually got my first job out of college, I succeeded in one of those two. I did not go back to the small town where I grew up. I went to work for an insurance company based in Columbus, Ohio. So I got somewhat of the big city experience. But I will say, like, once I was there, and my whole thought process is like, okay, I grew up, in a family business, a family agency. My father has worked in the insurance business from the time he graduated from college. In the early 90s, he actually bought the agency that I'm at today. So he's owned his own business from the early 90s. So for the majority of like what I would call like being aware of what's going on in my life growing up, my dad owned his own business. And that's probably one of the reasons why, I did not want to do this. I was, somewhat rebellious. This is not what it is that I'm going to do. And so I justified in my mind, I'm going to go to work for this insurance company because there are all these other areas that I can, work into. It doesn't have to really have to do with insurance. I can go into investments. I can go into legal. Like there's just a lot of opportunities within a large insurance company. And what I ended up finding after spending 3 years working there, and working very closely with agents, people just like my dad, is what a fantastic opportunity the independent agency side of this business really was. And so 3 years after starting at that insurance company in Columbus, I actually transitioned back to the agency, which is now over 16 years ago. So that's kind of how I found my way back to, the small town and the insurance business, both of which I said I did not want to do when I was graduating from college. And I will say, I've been here over 16 years. I wouldn't still be here if I didn't absolutely love it, but I very much fall in that category. Like I would not have given this a second thought if it wasn't for the fact that my family was in this business and I got to see it kind of firsthand. But I'm so glad that I did because I absolutely love what it is that I get to do every day, the people that I get to work with, and the people that I get to meet along the way.
Hey guys, if you're looking to improve your bottom line, allow your team to operate efficiently, and really improve that customer retention, I believe you should check out Ascend. Ascend is the all-in-one insurance payment solution. They are focused on streamlining your invoicing, premium financing, accounting, and they'll even make your carrier payables for you. They are taking agency bill and making it as easy as direct bill. That is a game changer. They integrate with all of the major AMS players, and here's the best part. It's free. There is no subscription, no cost to you. They allow your customers to pay how they want. If you are interested in improving your efficiency, go visit ascend.com/insurance refocused and let them know that we sent you.
I totally relate to never thinking that I would actually be in insurance. I obviously have my mom who brought me in, but as I was starting my career in insurance, in my college life, my public administration, like people would ask me, hey, are you liking what you're doing? Why do you want it? Like, this does not have anything to do with public administration. Why are you going in that direction? And I would tell them, I'm learning a lot about the skills that I need to go work in the public sector, which this really is the public sector. Let's be real. We're serving people, but I don't think I necessarily want to stay here. And now a year later, I'm like, hey mom, let's launch a podcast to talk to people so that I can learn and move up in this industry because I love it so much. So I think for me, the biggest thing about this industry that I absolutely love is connecting with people and learning from people. I think it's just the magic that makes this industry what it is.
I would wholeheartedly agree.
Yes. With that being said, I have started working with my mom a little bit, right, on this podcast, on some different things. And I would love for you to share your experience of being in an agency with your dad and what that experience was like for you, and just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So, I've learned, I think, quite a bit from the time that I first started. So I was certainly naive whenever I came back here. And I've since learned in the, like I said, 16 years that I've been here, that just how fortunate my father and I are in terms of the working relationship that we have and, kind of the position that our agency's in. And I will tell you, that was somewhat by accident. That's not something that I was conscious of in terms of how difficult, family transitions are and working with family in an agency whenever I came back here. It's one of those things that had I known like how difficult it was, my decision might have been different. I didn't leave the carrier I was working with because it wasn't a great situation. I loved what it is that I was doing. I just saw more opportunity in the role that I'm in now. But what I always tell people, because they always have questions, how did you guys do it? What's the secret? And And I wish I had a really good, like simple answer for, well, just do this and it'll all work out. The reality is, you hit on it. It's people. And anytime people are involved, it can be very messy. And the reason I think that things worked out for us, I was very fortunate that I came back to a situation where, like I said, my father had owned the agency for a number of years before I ever got here, had been involved in insurance his entire career, and was by all measures extremely successful. And it would have been very easy for him to say to me and to look to me whenever I came back to the agency as, this is what it is that I've done. Here's how it is that I've, been successful. You follow in my footsteps, because the path is already paved. I know what it is that you need to do to be successful. Just go do it. Like, basically listen to what it is that I have to say. And I can tell you right now, that's not the situation that I came back to. He was very open-minded. He was very open to the ideas that I brought in. He still wanted a lot of information. He still wanted to validate what it is that I was suggesting. So it wasn't just like, hey, here's a blank check, go do whatever you want. But it wasn't, you're going to learn it my way. And then once you've learned it my way, you can do it your way. That was not the situation at all. And then conversely, I think from my perspective, I didn't come into the agency, I didn't come into the situation that I was in with the mindset that, hey, I've spent 3 years working for a big insurance company. I've got my CPCU, I've got all this experience. I know better than you. I'm going to completely transform this small town agency because I know what it is that we need to be going forward. That was not the mentality I came in with. My mindset was, this agency's been around for 100 years. It's been incredibly successful. There is so much that I have to learn in order to be able to perpetuate that success. And so I think it was the combination of those two. I think if you had to put a term to it, it was humility, kind of on both sides, coming into that situation that ultimately led us to be successful. Because, there's always going to be things that come up. There was definitely times that we disagreed, but I think because we both came to it with the mentality that I just described, it made getting through those times far easier. I think it made for fewer of those moments. And when they did occur, they were much easier to work through than what they would have been if either one of us kind of came into that situation with a different mentality.
So Matt, you talked about that there's things that you've done to innovate, but you didn't come in and just start immediately and start changing everything. I mean, your agency celebrated 100 years a few years ago, and we're going to talk about that also. But tell me, as I look at our industry and I see someone who has a 30 plus year career ahead of them, you're going to have to innovate in order to really have a good career and be able to meet the needs of your customers in the future versus the way that we've done it in the past. So in your perspective, number one, what have you done over those 16 years in the agency to innovate? And what do you think we still need to do in order to set ourselves up for success?
That's such a good question. So what I will say, we're going to, spend whatever an hour today talking. We're going to condense everything that's largely happened in 16 years down to an hour. So I don't want to oversimplify what this process is. It really was obviously a lot of work, and it took a lot of time to get there, and plenty of failures. A lot of times that I made mistakes. But what I will say is whenever I got here, it was not about innovation. I was not coming in trying to disrupt the way things that have always been done. Whenever I started, I was in 100% production role. I was a producer. So like I said, it was not me coming in and trying to change the way things had always been. And it wasn't me coming in saying like, hey, we're not using this technology, we should. It was very much me coming in saying, we've been successful for 100 years. Show me how, show me why. And really kind of my mindset was, there's probably 90% of what it is that's happening right now that's absolutely perfect. And it's what's contributed to our success, and we need to keep doing it. And so it's what's that 10% that we potentially may need to tweak a little bit in order to be better. But really, like those first 6-7 years was for me learning the agency. It was, understanding how it is that we did things, why it is that was important, why it was meaningful to our clients, why our clients chose to work with us. Because the the reality is it wasn't because of a technology, and we weren't losing clients for a lack of a investment in technology at that point. So it really was just fundamentals, learning the agency, learning what it is that we were doing really well, so that I could make sure those were things that we protected, things that we continued, to do going forward. But obviously throughout that period of time, there's certain gaps that you start to uncover, right? Like you start to realize that, the agency is maybe not in the best position possible to be able to attract and retain a younger generation of insurance buyer. And, 15 years ago, it was really easy to say, well, those just aren't the types of clients that we want, right? But no one's looking at a Lindsay Wallace right now saying that's not a client we want. Like everybody wants that kind of client. So I had to start to think about, okay, what types of investments are we making, to not only make somebody like Lindsay aware of our agency, make her comfortable buying insurance from us, but then just as important, what tools and resources are we putting at her disposal that's going to make her continue to choose us year after year? And so, I always use this analogy. Whenever I first got out of college and got a real job working for that insurance company, it's always been like a dream of mine. I wanted to have this like big screen TV, right? And so, I had this little apartment, but big screen TV. And I spent months researching that. At the time, it was a really big, expense for me. I wanted to make sure that I got it right. I spent countless hours researching all my different options. But whenever it came time to actually buying that, I went into a Best Buy and I talked with somebody about the decision that I had really already made. But I needed just some advice and some guidance to kind of get over that finish line. And I always use that analogy to where we are as an industry. Like we cannot be in the position where we are telling consumers that the only way you get what it is that we provide is if you pick up the phone and have a conversation with me. We have got to be in the position where we're giving consumers the information they're looking for when they're in that research phase. And if we're not showing up whenever they're doing that kind of research, we can't ever hope to be in a position to work with those clients when they're ready to buy. And so that was really kind of the eye opener for me whenever I started looking at our agency and some of the very first technologies that we invested in. It was we're not showing up anywhere at all from a digital standpoint whenever consumers are looking for questions that they have about their insurance. And if we're not showing up then, we're never going to be in a position to be able to convert them to clients whenever they're ready to buy. We're solely going to be relying on clients referring us, which again, that's part of the thing that was working really well. So how do we continue to do that? But we can't 100% rely on that going forward. So a good example, like the very first investment that we made that again, like it took some convincing to get my father there, but he ultimately said yes to it. And now looking back, I think anybody listening to this would say, you got in then? Like we invested in HubSpot in 2009. In 2009, they were a complete unknown. Like
it's huge, Matt. It's huge.
Any agent today, like, hey, invest in HubSpot. And they say, yeah, well, why wouldn't we do that? Or something equivalent. But back in 2009, like that was not the case. So that was a good example of, I felt really strongly about that. I put the business, case together. I reviewed everything with him. He was in on the demos. And ultimately he's like, we hung up the phone and he's like, you know what? I don't get this. I don't understand this, but you clearly do. If you think this is what it is that we need to do, I'll support you. And he did. And we're still customers of theirs today. So,
well, Matt, you shared that story about HubSpot, and I actually use it in some of my presentations about, listen, we had a website, but we didn't know where people were going. We didn't know what they were looking at. And honestly, at the time, the agency was really interested in billboards. Or sponsoring a hole on a golf course, or, the traditional things that agency owners do for marketing. And you had to convince them that maybe there was a different way. Maybe there was something else that we could do. And what really struck me about the story is you took the time to do the research, put together a plan, think about what that would be, rather than just saying, this is the only way. Like, we got to do this. And that process allowed you to actually stop doing something as well, correct?
It did. Yep.
Yeah, so maybe the billboards weren't producing exactly what you needed, and that's not where you needed to place your money or place your marketing dollars. It really was thinking about where your customers are and what they need to do. So, for me, for agency owners or future agency owners that are out there and thinking about how to innovate and how to drive change inside an agency, that you can see opportunity. It's not throw everything away. It's be thoughtful and think about what your dynamic is and how you can move in that direction in a very thoughtful way. I think that's why you guys have been successful. It's actually pretty impressive to see that. I want to talk about one other thing that you guys did, because there's a lot of talk about agency owners that have last names versus agencies that don't have a last name in the name. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I obviously started my own business and my name was in my first logo. Actually, I had some people say, just start the business with your name only. And this was kind of ringing true in my head when I was getting that advice. But you guys went through a serious rebranding. And I'd love to hear you talk about that, because it was an agency that had 3 last names, if I'm not mistaken. And now obviously you run CoverLink. So talk to me about the rebranding process.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that, geez, we would have had 7 or 8 last names, because what had happened over the years. So the agency that I'm in right now, the agency that's been around since 1920, when it was founded, was Hill and Hamilton. So it was named after the 2 original founders. And one of the reasons that we landed on an entire rebrand, part of it was, yes, it was named after the 2 founders, going back almost 100 years. But we'd acquired a number of agencies over the last 10, 15 years as well. And every time we did, we left the name of the agency the same. And our mindset always was, those names are meaningful in the communities where they're located. It's not important for us to have, that agency under the Hill and Hamilton umbrella. We'll just leave it the same. And honestly, quite frankly, it was just easier, right? I mean, it was less disruption. It helped us retain more clients, leaving those the same. That was our thought. So then you fast forward to the point where you've got now, at the time that we rebranded, we had 3 different brands that we were managing. So think about that: 3 different websites, 3 different sets of letterhead, 3 different ways the phone's answered every time it rings, depending on who's calling in. Really just inefficient from our perspective. There was really no way for one office to help out another. And when we started doing some initial research before we ever truly decided if we were going to go this route, what we ended up finding is our clients, they didn't really care. Like, first of all, the people that weren't clients, because we interviewed, people within the community that weren't clients of ours. And sometimes we got, responses like, I don't even know who Hill and Hamilton is. Right. So I think we had this perception in our mind that it's like so much more important than what it actually is.
Right.
And that research kind of validated that. So once we were armed with that, we felt far more comfortable moving forward with a rebrand. And then to your point, Carey, like the question became, okay, what's that name going to be? And it kind of goes back to, similar to what my, graduated from college. I knew what it wasn't going to be more so than I knew what it was going to be. And I knew it wasn't going to be named after any individual. And for us, the biggest reason was it just makes it far easier for us from a branding, from a marketing, from an acquisition standpoint. If we're buying another agency that's named after the founder and we're saying, you're going to change your name to be named after us as an individual, that's just a different conversation than saying, we're going to rebrand your agency to CoverLink, right? And so for a whole host of reasons, it made a lot of sense from an efficiency, from a marketing, from a branding standpoint. The biggest unknown, though, was we're completely disrupting a brand that's been around for 100 years. One of the other agencies that we had acquired in another small town here in Ohio, their brand had been around since 1923. So almost as long as what we had. So this was not an insignificant change. And it, from our perspective, required a lot of thought and a lot of respect. And it took us 18 months from the time that we made the decision that we're going to do this to the time that we actually launched the new name. And I would say the biggest reason that it took that amount of time is because of that thought and respect that we wanted to put into this to make sure that we got it right. We had two goals that we were trying to accomplish. Number one, we wanted to make sure that the story that we told, the name that we picked, everything going forward, while yes, it's future facing, it also paid great respect and tribute to the past where we had been. We wanted to make it clear we were not walking away from who we were and everything that we had done up to that point. We were simply saying this is a brand refresh. Here's why, and here's what it is going forward, and the meaning behind the name. And then the other big piece, the reason that it took the amount of time that it did, is that we reached out to every single one of our clients. And I don't mean a mass email. I mean a phone call, a face-to-face meeting. We talked to every single one of our clients to tell them what it is that we were doing and why it is that we were doing it, so that when we launched this on March 1st of 2020, not a single client of ours could say they didn't know, and that they weren't aware of what it is that was going on. And that proved to be the absolute best decision that we could have made. I've had a lot of agencies reach out to me since, saying, hey, we're thinking about going through this. What advice do you have? If I could only give them one piece of advice, that's it. Because not only did our clients appreciate the fact that we reached out, we had a chance to tell the story behind the why, which was meaningful to them. But the unintended consequence was when we launched the name, obviously those people that weren't clients of ours, we had no reason to reach out and tell them. So a lot of them were talking to our clients and, hey, did you see Hill and Hamilton rebranded to CoverLink? What's that about? And our clients are kind of sitting back saying, well, yeah, we knew about that. We knew about that months ago. So they felt like they were in the know. And so it was just like one more kind of touch point that endeared them a little bit to us, where it's like they knew something that everybody else didn't know. And in that moment, it's like, yeah, I knew that. So that's not why it is that we did it. I hadn't even thought about that, but we heard about that quite a bit after the whole thing was said and done. So that, like I said, was ended up being a good decision that we made.
It sounds like you've taken on so many incredibly big initiatives and you've done them very successfully. So what is your secret behind getting your team to trust you in spite of the fact that the previous owner, your father, was still very active in the agency?
Yeah, it's another really good question. And again, that's not something that I probably recognized whenever I got here. I was somewhat naive in that sense. But I think because I approached my role in the agency when I got here the way that I didn't come into an ownership role. Like when I started here 16 years ago, it was not as an owner. It wasn't even in a management role. I was in a production role, right? So I was doing the same thing that other sales executives in our organization were doing. I was working with account managers the same way that they were. And I think going that route, in a way, kind of putting my time in and being humble throughout that process, I think they started to realize that I wasn't coming in with that entitlement type mentality, number one. And I think number two, getting the chance to kind of work side by side, I think a lot of them started to realize like, hey, he might actually know what it is that he's talking about. Like that CPCU might actually have done something, for him. So I do think, it's a combination. I think, at the end of the day, like you have to have credibility. Like you've got to be able to do the work and do the job. And if you can't do that, no amount of humility, I think, is going to get you there. But I think you can have all the intelligence in the world. And if you don't treat people with the respect that they deserve, then you may command their respect, but you're not going to earn it. And I think that was the way that I was able to earn it early on. And so I think, it just kind of becomes a domino effect. So, I was able to do that. And then you implement a little change. And a little change for us is like investing in HubSpot in 2009. So we do that. And then all of a sudden you're able to start to track some of those results, and you can start to show, kind of month in and month out, hey, here's where we were prior. Here's all the work that we're doing now from like a content creation standpoint, how it is that we're measuring it. And here's the results that we're seeing. And it's just like, a little deposit to that, trust account month in and month out. And then that kind of buys you, okay, I trust you enough now to take on this next project that maybe is a little bit bigger. And it's just, over time, you kind of build that credibility. And we've certainly made mistakes. I mean, we bought agencies before that probably didn't go as smoothly as what they could have, and that's completely on me. But I think because there had been enough of those decisions that had gone really well, our team has rebounded from that, and that trust and that respect is still there, at least as far as I know.
So, Matt, I'm glad that you mentioned acquisitions. That's definitely a topic I'd love to talk to you about, because a lot of agency owners want to grow by acquisition. They want to be able to grow their team. They want to be able to grow their footprint. And you've done that very successfully in a lot of situations, not so successfully in some others. I mean, obviously you've learned from it, but why don't you help me understand how your approach to acquisitions has morphed over time, and what that process looks like for you guys?
Yeah. So I think to understand, at least from our perspective, like our acquisition strategy really backs up more to an overall business model, in the sense that nowhere in our business plan do we talk about acquisitions. So from an agency perspective, everything that we're doing, everything that we're building, the investments that we're making, it's all designed to achieve organic growth as an agency. And our mentality has always been that if we don't have kind of those foundational pieces in place, who are we to go out and buy an agency and bring them into kind of a shaky foundation, right? And so, number one, we don't really maximize the investment that we're making, and number two, like, that's not, from our perspective, like a real good long-term strategy from a growth standpoint as an agency. So for us, that's really where it is that we started. And you're right, we've acquired a lot of agencies, but it's all happened primarily in the last 6 years, I would say. My father bought an agency, really it was all on him. It was an agency that he had built a relationship with for years before I got here. And then I'd been here for 1 year when we acquired that agency. And then we went through this spell where, we had 7 or 8 years where we didn't acquire a single agency. And that really goes to kind of what I was saying, where everything that we were doing internally was to build for that organic growth. And I think what's ended up happening as a result of that is that we've been really well positioned to capitalize on opportunities whenever we're presented with them, number one. And then number two, because we kind of have those foundational pieces in place, it makes it much easier then to bring those agencies into our organization and kind of drop them in to the process that we already have built. That then I think helps maximize the retention of those clients and actually makes that acquisition, a valuable acquisition for us, which then of course, kind of fuels the ability for us to be able to do the next one. And I think that's why we're starting to see the cadence really pick up here in the last several years, because again, it's kind of like, building on one success makes the next one a little bit easier.
And so someone who wants to do this, can you share maybe something that didn't go so great in an acquisition, something that maybe is missed very often in an acquisition from your perspective? Obviously, I get to see that from a different perspective in the role that I'm in today, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective. If you were looking back in time, and is there one thing or piece of advice you would give to someone who is embarking on a possible acquisition? Just be aware and make sure that you do this.
Yeah. So absolutely make sure you do your due diligence. And what I mean by that, so I kind of got caught up in that early in my career where, like I said, I came in as a producer, I'm doing X amount month in and month out. And you start to look at where it is, from a vision standpoint, where you want to be 10, 15, 20 years into your career, whatever that is. And in my mind, it's like, I'm not going to be able to achieve that 100% on my own. And so we've got two ways to do that. We can build to grow organically and do it 100% that way. Or we can, look to acquire. And I kind of got caught up in like the easy, quick way to get there is to acquire. And so I really became extremely interested in being able to buy an agency. And so we're still making all those, investments internally, but my focus is largely on, developing opportunities. And so, I'm building relationships with the carriers that we work with, because we've had acquisition opportunities that came from carriers. Their agency reached out to them, said, "Hey, I'm ready to exit. Who do I talk to?" And so, being on the radar with the carriers and having that good relationship with them, and those carriers knowing that you've got their back and it's a partnership, and you're going to, help perpetuate that book for them, like that's been important. So, starting to kind of get involved in many areas is what I can to develop those opportunities. And the mistake I made is that the very first one that was of considerable size that came along, I was so excited about the opportunity that I was basically willing to do whatever it is that I could to make it work. And I failed to do the proper amount of due diligence that I should have during that initial, process. And it came back to bite me fairly significantly within the first year. And really, quite frankly, no fault of the seller. I mean, he was just doing what it is that he felt like was in his best interest as the seller and as a business owner. It's 100% on me, but it's a learning lesson, and it's obviously one that I've never repeated since. And if I can give anybody advice that is looking to do this or that's working on their first one, is don't overlook that due diligence piece. Like, don't rush into a deal just for the sake of saying you acquired an agency. Because if you rush through the process and you don't have the I's dotted and T's crossed, it might work out okay, but it might not. And when you're, looking at some of the valuations and multiples that we are nowadays, like, you can't afford to make those mistakes sometimes the way that I did.
I would agree with you. I think that a lot of times an acquisition becomes an emotional decision, not one based on data or based on information, if you don't do your due diligence. And listen, I think there's lots of people out there that do it and do it very well, but some people that they acquire maybe one or two agencies in their entire career. So it's really important to make sure that you make the right decision and you assess everything. And I can honestly tell you, I know for sure not every buyer is right for every seller, and not every seller is right for every buyer. So knowing what you're looking for is incredibly important as well. And that it fits with the culture that you've worked so hard to build is incredibly important. And I know you do that. I mean, it's clear in how you've talked about how you handled your branding, how you handled a technology change like HubSpot. You take great care. So you want to make sure you take the same kind of care and don't disrupt this crazy, awesome foundation that you've built because you really wanted to have a deal go through, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of a piece of advice my dad gave me really early on. And at the time, it's one of those where it's just like, yeah, that's a typical dad piece of advice type of thing. And now here I am, like, in the role that I am in the agency now, finding myself going back to that time and time again. But he told me really early on, actually, I'm pretty sure he told me on that deal that I, failed to do all the due diligence that I should have. He's like, keep in mind, he's like, your success or failure in this business when it comes to acquisitions now, he's like, your success or failure is not going to be determined by the deals that you do. He's like, it's going to be determined by the ones that you walk away from. And it's kind of, it makes your point. Like, not every buyer is right for every seller. And I learned that the hard way a little bit. But I can tell you, like, there have absolutely been opportunities that we have gone all the way through the due diligence process and got to the end and said, like, this just isn't a right fit. And as a respectful and polite manner as what we can, but it's like, this is just not going to be a good fit. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for us. And we walked away. Some of those are early enough that it's probably too early to tell, but some of them have been within, or have been several years ago. And you can look back now and say, yeah, that was the right call. Like, thank God that we did that. What position would we be in right now had we tried to fit that square peg in the round hole?
Yeah. I like how you reflect back on advice that your dad's given you. A lot of times I definitely reflect on advice that my mom gives me every day. I mean, I think parents, how do I want to phrase this? Growing up.
Careful. Lindsay.
Be very careful. I'm kidding.
Growing up, as a kid, someone who is young, the advice your parents give you is like, yeah, whatever, mom.
Yeah.
see you never. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like in the back of the mind. But since growing up and working in the same industry as my mom, her advice is so incredibly valuable, as is the advice of people in this industry who are, you know, experienced and have gone through different things. I think, as I said in the beginning of this episode, that is one of the reasons that I love this industry so much. If you had to give someone from the next generation who is looking to take the next step in their career a piece of advice, what do you think you would say?
So my advice would be what I kind of lucked into, and looking back now, realized that it ended up being one of the best decisions that I'd ever made, but I didn't make it for this reason whenever I did. I got invited to volunteer for our state association in Ohio. And at the time, I wasn't as busy as what I am right now. And so I thought, yeah, what the heck, I'll do that. I ended up meeting the absolute best people, not only in this industry, but that I know, people that I still call dear friends today. And people that have helped me in my career immensely, people that have, sent business my way, people that have helped me acquire agencies. I mean, it goes beyond just these are great people you want to have in your life. These are people that have helped shape my industry or my agency and my career where it is right now. So like I said, I think getting involved in whether it's a state association, a network that you're a part of, like being able to be around these individuals in our industry that have the level of knowledge that they do, that are so willing to share, and that are willing to be there whenever, things get tough, and being able to help you through that and talk you through that, whether it's business advice, whether sometimes it just feels like they're your therapist, right? I mean, it's just having those individuals end up being so much more important than I think what people ever really consider when they get asked to volunteer. So many times it's like, well, I don't have time to do that, or I don't really see how I'm going to get value out of that. Or, you can come up with a million excuses as to why you shouldn't do it or why you're not going to do it. And all I would say is that looking back, that's one of the best decisions that I ever made, was to say yes to that opportunity. I don't know that I would have met Carey if I hadn't said yes to that opportunity. Some of the greatest agents that I've ever known, like Perk Reichley and Seth Zaremba, and the opportunities that have been afforded to our agency, to me personally, are directly correlated to those people that I got to meet whenever I said yes to that. So that'd be my biggest piece of advice.
I would agree with you, Matt. I got to tell you, I am so thankful you said yes to that piece of, or to that opportunity. And I'm really excited that I happened to be working at that state association at the time, because you've shaped my career. You are the reason that I say the agent of today and tomorrow are the agents that can marry relationships, data, and technology. It's the core of everything that I do. It's something I believe very passionately about. I would agree, like Perk Reichley, salt of the earth. I mean, what an incredible man. And he impacts your life in ways you never had any idea. So I would agree. I think that's one of the best things you can do is get involved, surround yourself with people that are going to make you better and make you think differently. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us and sharing your story. I know there's tons of agents out there that are going to learn from your experience and your advice, just like you've learned from so many other agents, Matt. And if someone wanted to reach out to you, Matt, how could they find you?
Probably wouldn't be too difficult. All my contact information is on our website, coverlink.com. My email address is there, phone number is there. More than happy to talk to anybody, whatever situation they got going on. If there's anything that I can do to help, so many people have done that for me. And so more than happy to do that for anyone else if I can.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you both. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.